In previous videos, we studied the structured data type SDT, which could then be used for a variable as a simple data type or collection. And we saw how we could assign values to them by code in web panel events. In the case of a simple variable, assigning a value to each member, first using the variable name followed by a period and member name. For example, we did this by hard coding. Each member was assigned a value, and as a result, the content of the variable was displayed on the screen. And then we did it this other way, accessing a record from the attraction entity. In this case, the attraction name attribute Louvre Museum, which is what the screen looked like. In either case, to assign a value to each of the members, we have to repeat the name of the variable and then specify the name of the member, which is a bit cumbersome when we know we want to assign a value to all the members of the variable. In the second web panel, with the variable collection inserted into the web layout as a grid, we are faced with the cumbersome task of having to repeat the name of the simple variable to access each member, as in the first case, as well as having to worry about memory space and having to manipulate the collection with the add method. To simplify the manipulation of data structures, whether simple or collections, GeneXus provides an object called DataProvider, which when executed returns a structure, simple or collection, already loaded to whoever invoked it, for example a web panel, and which can therefore assign that structure with data to a variable of the same data type. In other words, the result of a data provider execution can be assigned to an SDT variable. The data provider will return a simple or collection structure loaded in memory. We will see both cases by modifying the previously created web panels. Let's start with the first one. We could replace this assignment by code, member by member, of the SDT variable with an assignment of the integer variable to what this data provider returns, which we will have to create in the KB. The advantage is that it will be easier to load the SDT members into the data provider than to do it this other way. Let's start by looking at this case in GeneXus and then move on to the collection. If we want to load the variable with these hard-coded values, we'll need to create a data provider with this name, designed to return in memory an SDT of type attraction info, with these values declared in the object's source. The way to declare these values must be simpler than the one shown here. Let's create a data provider named getAttractionInfo. We drag the attractionInfo SDT into the source and we can see that it brings the SDT structure. We then manually fill in the members with these sample values. Let's review the object's properties, particularly those in the output section. We see a property named output, which was automatically assigned the attractionInfo object when we dragged the SDT. This, along with the collection property, set to false, indicates that the output of this data provider, what it returns to the caller, will be a structure of this type. This is how simply and clearly we define the contents of the SDT we want to return, following the exact syntax of its structure. If a member is not explicitly defined, it remains empty. For example, we could not assign city and flight arrivals. Let's leave them commented for testing. GeneXus will treat them as empty based on their data type, an empty string in one case and 0 in the other. Let's save the object. All this could also have been requested from Nexa, for example, in this way. Let's open the Show Attraction web panel. It looks slightly different from what we had previously, but it includes code we've already seen. On one hand, we have the hard-coded load, and also the commented load of the Louvre attraction obtained from the attraction table in the database. Let's keep all of that commented. To the attraction info variable, we assign what the getAttractionInfo data provider returns. Remember that the web layout displays each member of the variable. Let's add city to it. Let's run it to test. We see exactly what we expected. In the second case we loaded the structured variable with data from the database using the forEach command, and so we wrote attributes to the right of the assignments. How can we achieve this same thing within the data provider? The output will be of the same type, but unlike the hard-coded case, now it will have to go to the database to load the members. So, in the source, we will assign the values of these attributes to the members, as we did here in the forEach. But how do we indicate the base transaction, attraction, and the filter? Here we cannot write the forEach command, because the data provider language is of another type, known as declarative. Commands are not accepted. However, the structure is analogous, so it will be enough to indicate that this group, AttractionInfo, will take its data from the attraction-based transaction, where attraction name is equal to this string, Louvre Museum. In short, although there are differences, we are declaring the same access logic as the forEach. The base transaction is declared with the from clause, and for filters, exactly the same, where clauses apply as for the forEach. Let's modify the data provider source, changing the hard-coded assignments for the attributes, uncommenting the last two assignments, and adding which base transaction the information will be taken from, and the filter to keep records that comply with it. Let's save. Remember that we had a unique index on the attraction table for the attraction name attribute, so at most one record with this value will be found. We don't need to modify anything in the Show Attraction web panel. However, before testing the assignment to the variable of what is returned by the current version of the data provider, let's remember what the navigation list informed us when we did it with the forEach, so we can compare. Then we leave the data provider invocation commented out and uncomment the forEach. Let's press F5. We see this for first attraction, which, remember, appears instead of the forEach, because it will retrieve a single record, the first one with this value. Let's take this opportunity to see the web panel in action. Now let's try invoking the data provider. The data provider navigation list is identical to the forEach case. When we run it, we see what we expected. There is no difference. In summary, here we see the forEach command in a web panel event, and here we see the solution invoking the data provider. The data provider has a declarative language, not a command language. But we see that by placing the from clause in the group, we are indicating access to the database just as the forEach does. And we can also use the other clauses of the forEach, such as where. Without the need of any extra indication, it is interpreted that this group may give rise to multiple items in the output, as many as there are records in attraction that meet the filters. In our case, there will be only one due to the unique index. But if the index were not there, there could be several. However, If the collection property says false, it means that only one attraction info will be returned. We are now getting an idea of how a collection of items will be returned.